Hi everyone, my name is Lu Xu. Today I will present some new findings in the benzene oxidation mechanism based on combined laboratory experiments done at Caltech and theoretical work done by Christian and Henrik in Denmark. Our work has been recently published in Environmental Science and Technology, and I am more than happy to hear about any comments you may have on this work. Aromatic compounds are an important class of anthropogenic emissions. They are heavily distributed over a densely populated area and play an important role in urban air quality. There are significant uncertainties in aromatic chemistry. Here I want to use benzene, the simplest aromatic compound, as an example to illustrate. Previous studies have shown that the endocyclization is a dominant reaction of the benzene-derived proxy radical. The reaction rate of this endocyclization has only been evaluated using theoretical approach, and the calculated rates differ by 3 orders of magnitude. Recent studies have detected highly oxygen molecules and products with 5 carbon atoms, but their formation mechanisms are not clear. And there are many other uncertainties, and they will be discussed along the presentation. In this study, we aim to investigate the reaction kinetics and the products of key radicals in the benzene photooxidation. We use benzene as a model molecule and provide insights into the chemistry of more structurally complex aromatics. A set of laboratory experiments were performed in our chamber reactor at room temperature under varying NO concentrations. The key instrument is a newly developed gas chromatography, chemical ionization, and mass spectrometer, GC-SIMS. The SIMS uses CF2O- as a regional ion, which can detect multifunctional oxygenated products. The SIMS is coupled with a customized gas chromatography to separate isomers. Next, I will take you to a quick tour of 4 key radicals in benzene oxidation. Many reactions in the system are reversible, site-specific, and stereo-specific. So I will omit some details and present a simplified version of the mechanism. The benzene oxidation starts from OH addition to the aromatic ring to produce an alkyl radical. This alkyl radical can react with oxygen and then eliminate HO2 to produce phenol, or the alkyl radical can react with oxygen and then undergo endocyclization to produce a bicyclic radical. As mentioned before, the calculated rates of this endocyclization reaction differ by 3 orders of magnitude. Here, I experimentally constrain the reaction kinetics of the proxy radicals based on the dependence of the phenol yield on radical lifetime. The idea is that by increasing the NO concentration, more RO2 react with NO. As a result, the products from the RO2 unimolecular reactions, such as the phenol and the bicyclic radical, will be inhibited. By fitting the phenol yield with the kinetic model, the effective production rate of phenol and the bicyclic radical are calculated to be 420 and 370 per second. These rates are effective rates because they include the equilibrium constant between these radicals. Further, the endocyclization rate is estimated to be about 3,900 per second, which is very close to the calculation by Glowacki et al. The take-home message from this slide is that under atmospheric relevant conditions, the effective production rates of phenol and bicyclic radical are similar. So roughly half of the carbon funnels into phenol and the other half goes into this bicyclic radical channel. Let's continue with this bicyclic alkyl radical. In the widely used ACM, this radical has 2 reaction pathways. One pathway is reaction with oxygen to produce a proxy radical. The other pathway is isomerization to break the aromatic ring and produce a C6 epoxy dicarbonyl compound, the yield of which is 11% in ACM. This isomerization pathway is proposed by a theoretical study in early 1990s, but so far there's no experimental evidence to support this 11% yield. And in the experiments, we do observe signals at its mass, but the yield is only 1% under atmospheric condition. We also did theoretical calculation and show that this isomerization reaction is negligible slow. So we suggest that the bicyclic alkyl radical exclusively reacts with oxygen to produce a proxy radical under atmospheric condition. Next, let's move on to the reaction of this bicyclic proxy radical. When it reacts with NO, less than 0.2% becomes organic nitrate. This value is surprisingly small. To the best of our knowledge, there is only one study that reported the yield of this bicyclic nitrate, which is 3.4% by Elrod. The difference between the two studies is mainly because of isomer interference. According to the gas chromatographies collected in this study, there are 5 distinct peaks that have the same chemical formula as the bicyclic nitrate. The nitrate yield in the literature includes all isomers, but in reality, only the peak eluting at 1680 seconds is consistent with the structure of the bicyclic nitrate after we test the presence of a common-common bond and the number of acidic hydrogen. So the literature nitrate yield is biased high. Regarding to the Al2H2 reaction, the measured yield of all closed shell products is less than 1%. This observation is very different from conventional mechanism, which assumes the peroxide is the only product from the Al2H2 reaction. And in fact, there is growing evidence suggesting that the Al2 with increasing substitutions largely produce OH and alkoxy radical after reaction with HO2. And lastly, I also probed the unimolecular reaction of the bicyclic proxy radical by both experimental and theoretical methods, but found that the unimolecular reaction is likely not competitive with the bimolecular reactions. So overall, in the atmosphere, the bicyclic proxy radical mainly undergoes bimolecular reactions with NO and HO2, produce alkoxy radical, and recycles NOx and HOX. The last radical I want to discuss is this bicyclic alkoxy radical. The dominant reaction of this alkoxy radical is to break the carbon-carbon bond and then break the OO bond to produce a opened multifunctional alkoxy radical. This C6H7O4 alkoxy radical. The current mechanism assumes this alkoxy radical exclusively undergoes decomposition, which produces a glyoxal and a butanediol. However, both our study and another recent study by Wang et al. Find that the chemistry of this C6H7O4 alkoxy radical is more diverse than expected. First, we found that 2 isomers are produced from the decomposition of this bicyclic alkoxy radical. The 2 isomers, cis and trans, are with respect to the central bond in the conjugated aldehyde group. And these 2 isomers have different chemistry. The cis isomer dominantly undergoes decomposition, but for the trans isomer, about half of it undergoes decomposition, and the other half can undergo a 1,5-aldehyde hydrogen shift. And this 1,5-aldehyde hydrogen shift is a newly identified pathway in the system. And the surprise continues after this hydrogen shift. Wang et al. Calculated that the alkyl radical produced from the hydrogen shift mainly undergoes decomposition rather than O2 addition. The decomposition is favorable because this alkyl radical is energized from the energy released from the bond breakage and the hydrogen shift along its formation pathway. And the decomposition pathway of this alkyl radical produces a ketone enol, which reacts very quickly and produces a diverse set of compounds, including formic acid and the formaldehydic acid. These compounds are indeed observed in our experiments, supporting the occurrence of the decomposition pathway. In contrast to Wang et al., which suggests decomposition as the only reaction of this alkyl radical, our calculations suggest that this alkyl radical can access other unimolecular reactions. So for example, about 30% of this alkyl radical undergoes a CO loss. This CO loss is accompanied by products with 5 carbon atoms, which provide a mechanism to produce lower carbon containing products detected in some studies. In addition to CO loss, a small fraction of this alkyl radical can add oxygen. Then the subsequent reaction can readily produce highly oxygenated molecules after a couple hydrogen shift reactions. So in conclusion, new reaction pathways are identified in the benzene oxidation, and they carry a substantial fraction of carbon, And the one thing I should point out is that right now the chemistry of these radicals is largely investigated using theoretical approach, but it requires further experimental investigation. Okay, I just discussed a lot of nitty-gritty details. Here are the 5 major take-home messages. First, under atmospheric condition, following OH addition to benzene, 50% of carbon funnels into phenol, and the rest 50% becomes bicyclic radical. And second, the nitrate branching ratio in the benzene oxidation is very small. The implication is that as NOx emissions are rapidly declining over the North America, the NOx lifetime and ozone formation will be greatly controlled by the formation of organic nitrate. So an accurate nitrate branching ratio is critical. The third finding is that the RO2-HO2 reaction largely produces OH instead of organic peroxide. And whether the RO2-HO2 reaction recycles OH or produces peroxide directly affects the atmospheric oxidation capacity in future low NOx scenario. And fourth, MCM misassigned about 10% carbon into a product that doesn't exist. And the carbon misassigned by MCM is likely associated with the products from the newly identified reactions of this multifunctional alkoxy radical. Okay, with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and take any questions. Thank you.